Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexa Smith, and I am the Chief of Staff at Manhattan School of Music. I want to welcome you to our Career Perspectives talk today, Finding Momentum, Career Momentum during this time where we're all home, trying to make the best of what our life is right now. And we have a really amazing group we've assembled here today to talk through what they're doing, some ideas of how we can use this time to our advantage, some real talk about what's just not working. So I want to introduce our panelists, but before I do that, I want to draw your attention to the Q&A box, which should be at the bottom of your screen. At the end of our discussion, we're going to have a little time for Q&A. So anytime during our discussion here, feel free to pop a question in there, and we'll do our best to get to those as time permits. I also want to let you know that today's panel is good for setting the stage credit for our Center for Musical Entrepreneurship. So students keep that in mind for today. All right, so let's get started. I'd like to introduce our panelists. So why don't we start with Mark Carey.
Good morning. All right. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope everyone is well. I'm the professor of improvisation and jazz studies, jazz piano at Manhattan School of Music. I'm here to be of service and to, share my experiences in this time with you guys. So.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
How about Alan?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Alan Kay. I'm a clarinet teacher and chamber music teacher at the school. And I'm very happy to be here with my colleagues this morning to work with you, talk with you.
Thank you. Or?
Hey, everybody. Good morning. Hope everybody is staying safe. I am a musical theater faculty at MSM, also work in a bunch of different musical genres. Thrilled to be here and chat with these incredible artists and learn from your questions.
Great. And Miles.
Hello, everyone. I'm Miles Weinstein with Unlimited Miles. We're a jazz booking agency. We manage a few clients, but mostly we are involved in booking worldwide.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. And let's get started. So the first question I want to ask all of you is just to talk a little bit about what your experience has been as an artist, or especially with what you do, Miles, adapting to what's happening in the crisis. Obviously, a lot of things were canceled right away. And how are you communicating with the organizations that you had things set up with? And what are you doing, with the time that suddenly more available to you? So maybe let's start with Alan.
Sure. Well, I think like everybody, I walked around in a state of confusion for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. It was certainly upsetting to see all my concerts and touring and festivals fade away one by one. As of now, I literally have no concerts on the books at all. Well, certainly through the summer, and it looks doubtful for much of the fall too. But I really began to think more positively about the experience and to search for ways, in discussion with friends and other colleagues, on how I could use the time productively. And little by little, I came up with some projects, things I've wanted to do for a long time that I really haven't had time to devote to. So I began to delve into, into music I've never played before, for example, stuff I have been teaching, but maybe haven't actually had time to prepare myself. Very difficult, unaccompanied solo clarinet pieces, for example. So now I feel better able to teach those pieces in the future, even. I've delved into music that is not written for my instrument, just to experience different genres, different instrumental styles, and so forth. And I've also taken the time to learn how to make my own videos. I really knew nothing before, and it's a little bit embarrassing because for years we've been asking all of our students to provide videos for their auditions, all kinds of auditions all over the world. Now I can finally make my own videos. I've learned, and this probably sounds silly to my colleagues who've been doing this for years already, but forgive me. I am proud of the fact that at least I've built up a little bit of technological know-how. I've also decided I'm going to, once and for all, and this gets a little esoteric maybe, I'm going to learn how to make clarinet reeds for once, so I have a little bit more control over those horrible little pieces of wood that we've been suffering through buying commercially for so many years. So, and this has really helped, just to remain positive, to realize that time is not the enemy, it's our resource in this time. It's what we can call upon to, make ourselves, to better ourselves, to educate ourselves, to delve into areas we haven't delved into before, and just come out better on the other side. So that's where I am right now.
That's great. Yeah, I think I know in preparation for this, there was a discussion about like the new normal. And like, this is not normal, and it's not going to be the norm, I guess, and that idea it's interesting to think about, and also just think about this moment in time and try and use it in the best way rather than just trying to get used to something that's so different.
Exactly.
Mark, I'm curious what you've been up to and how you've adapted.
Well, I'm adapting, and I've been up to really just trying to push myself further than I have before. I'm very thankful that I'm healthy, first of all, and in the frame of mind that is more productive. I spent a lot of time really going through an emotional whirlwind, I'd say, adjusting to what's happening, and things are coming daily. So what I've done is just kind of like set aside time to deal with this reality, and also set aside a lot of time to deal with things that are going to propel me forward. So that being said, the short list is, as a working musician, you don't often get the opportunity to practice and, kind of manicure some of the things that are out of place. You perform and you do your best. And that's what the performances are about. But for me, I've always had something in the back of my head saying, man, you gotta get deeper, and you gotta immerse yourself just like you're asking your students to do. And I do it, but this time that we have has really opened up, it's opened up a need for me to push. And I actually have to get up and do this, and push myself every morning and throughout the day, because the reality is that I'm not working the way I used to. My income is different. It's half of what it was. So I'm learning how to work with less. What I had to do personally was take myself out of New York City for this period, and put myself in an environment that I could be peaceful. Because that was that's always been my problem. It's just the environment. So now that I'm in a space that I can create and help others, I feel much better. So I've been working on collaborations with my peers, my different groups that I have. I've been working with some of the younger musicians to help them put their music out on different platforms like Bandcamp, which I held Bandcamp up because it's one of the most immediate platforms to build an audience on, also to share your work, to learn about other people's work in that community. Also, that platform doesn't mess with the other platforms like iTunes and things like that. So I've been developing that community there, and also helping the students to understand my students to understand the value in communicating and also putting your work out. And a lot of times we as artists, we wait till it's at its best to then release it because we're our own worst critics. But I think sometimes the work in progress is a great thing for people to see. So I've exposed the world to my work in progress through video streams that I've been doing. They're starting to be daily now. And things like that have been keeping me mentally stable and also keeping me in contact with those who I care about in the music, which is everyone in the music industry, but those who I've come in contact with, I've kept that relationship. And that's the short of it. Yeah.
That's great. I really like that idea of like evaluating what you need in your environment to do what you need to do. I think I think we've all sort of come up against that. I also got out of New York and I totally understand, you know, because you have to continue to be productive and seeing what you need when you're in your apartment all day or not able to get fresh air, things like that. So yeah, I think that's a great tip. Or how have you been coping with this time?
Yeah, I think I mostly at this point have so many dittos on what my esteemed colleagues have shared. I mean, Alan, for what it's worth, you mentioned a couple weeks of confusion. For me, I think it's probably been a couple months and rolling strong. You know, trying to figure out how to mostly just stay creative and continue the flow of the work that I'm excited about. And also, yes, 100% ditto on collaboration. I mean, one of the things that I've kind of rediscovered over this time, you know, I was, when March came around, I was in the middle of recording an album of music that I'd been working on for a couple of years, and then finally found the players I wanted in New York and booked the studio dates in April. And it was like this dream come true, coming to fruition. And I had written this musical, which was finally slated for a world premiere production in Austria in the summer that we were gearing for. So all of these kind of confluence of like dreams coming true finally in a way professionally that I was so excited for, and kind of watching them fall apart one by one. And for a while it was really tough. And, you know, I kind of started giving myself, first of all, I started making lists. I was like, all right, I'm going to wake up and this is the list of things I'm going to try to do today. Even if I accomplish 20% of them, at least it'll give me a very simple remedial task to do, whether if it's, I'm fundamentally a pianist, but, you know, I've always played guitar and I've wanted to really get my jazz chops up on guitar. And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna work through these 10 exercises today and see how that feels. And maybe I'll adjust it tomorrow because it felt like it didn't feel right or whatever. And I think over the course of a month, it really kind of opened me up to structuring time in a new kind of self-sufficient way, which was really exciting. And the bigger thing that kind of happened of it is that I started having conversations with a lot of like-minded professional artists and seeing what we're all struggling with and how we can help each other, and figuring out how we're negotiating how we make a living during this time as professional artists, but also how we continue to collaborate and for lack of a better word, barter with the skill sets that we all have. And so what I started doing is I started laying down tracks for my friends who were recording albums and had never maybe imagined piano on it, but I said, you know what, let me just throw you some stuff and see how that feels. And they started doing that in return. And so what's kind of happened in the interim is that weirdly, this album that I've been dreaming of is still being recorded in a completely different way. And we're not getting to sit in the studio and do live tracking and bounce off of each other. But what I've gotten to do is I've gotten to collaborate with a Palestinian oud player in a way that I never would have been able to otherwise, just because of lack of my own imagination in other times. And this has really forced me to open up how I'm framing the collaboration and what I'm willing to accept into my personal sphere. And it's been really rewarding actually seeing the magic that comes out of it. And so I'm just trying to keep true in that lane and say, okay, like this is hopefully very temporary, but in that temporary time, I'm going to make the most out of it and make as much music with as many people as I can. Great.
Wow. And Miles, you know, you have slightly different perspective representing so many artists. So what was that time like, especially like March, April, when we were first starting to see things get canceled? And
well, I don't need to say that it was pretty horrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, I was spending, and still am, spending most of my days dealing with cancellations or postponements. Or now the new thing is, a lot of presenters that have to cancel gigs are asking if the artist would do a live stream instead, which is, I have very mixed feelings about it, because most of them are really not very successful, I don't think. Some of them are, and the ones that are the ones that they know how to market the event. And those seem to be the ones that get the attention, that get the views. I've noticed that, the Village Vanguard just started doing something recently. We had Vijay Iyer do one this past weekend. And it was, I guess, fairly successful, maybe not as successful as the club had hoped it would be, but, it's brand new. So, they're trying to build, attention to that format. And I think that they will, as time goes on. I'm just not a fan of the, here I am in my living room kind of thing and giving it away for free, because it, I don't know that it cheapens what the artist does, but it definitely, actually, I'm going to contradict myself right now. It actually, I think, makes people hungry for the real thing. But I don't want to see it overdone, which I've started to see that happen in the last few weeks. Because people are just not going to tune in. It's just oversaturation.
Yeah.
What we did, and it took me a couple of months, reeling from all this, cancellations and all that stuff, is we put together what we're calling an Unlimited Miles Conservatory, in quotes. And basically what it is we're offering our artists to do virtual residencies via this platform, via Zoom. So it's essentially the same thing as if the artist was going to be in, Columbus, Ohio, doing a clinic or a workshop or even an extended residency, but it would be done online. And because of the uncertainty of what's going on with colleges and universities for the fall, I felt like this might be an idea that opened up the opportunity to continue to do that virtually. And so the students of whatever university could gather on this platform, and then the artist could conduct any number of educational activities. We just announced it last week, and we've gotten some initial good feedback on it. But it's also getting toward the end of June, and school is really, even under normal circumstances, school is no longer in session. So we're probably going to do another wave of campaigning it, getting closer to the school year, and see if we have more takers for it. But we did get initially a few takers, and it's not going to be a big money earning thing for the artist, but it helps keep them in touch with these different presenters or universities, and I think that could be a good thing. So the other thing, just personally, I've been, actually most of my days are in the office. I'm still working practically full days for no money.
Yeah.
But it's the reality. I mean, there's so many each day as time goes on, October cancellations. So it's just going to continue until we have a light at the end of this tunnel, which, to speak to your new norm thing, I keep saying to everybody, this is not a new norm. It's just a temporary norm. And we will get out of this. I mean, it's just a matter of when. And people will gather again, and it's just going to happen. but it may not be for some time. So we have to be realistic about that. But again, you know, with whatever free time I've had, I've actually been taking on an online course, Coursera. I don't know if anybody knows about that, you know, platform. Excuse me, that website. But a lot of them are free. Yeah. The one I'm taking is free. And you know, I'm actually listening to a lot more music. I'm getting back to the drums a little bit and practicing. So I'm trying to find different outlets during this time.
That's great. And I think, you know, it's hard to imagine, to me, it was hard to imagine, like, what can an artist manager do for their artists when there's no work? And that's such a great example of getting creative and helping the artists through this time too, because, you know, you have an investment in them, they have an investment in you, and it continues whether there's gigs or not. So that's great to hear. I'm interested to hear from you all what you think wasn't working in the arts before that through this time we'll have a better look at it. I mean, I certainly think from, you know, the MSM administrator's perspective that, you know, now being able to offer courses online, now that we know how to do that, we now are going to be able to do so many more things and offer more things even when we are back on campus. And that's really come out of this time where we've seen, like, okay, it actually does work really well in some settings, of course. So what do you think hasn't been working before that now we have an opportunity to adjust? Whoever wants to jump in.
Well, for me, I would say it's hard to think of what wasn't. Oh, sorry. It's hard to think of what wasn't working when I'm not working at all. So I'm very thankful in retrospect for the opportunities that I was privileged to be a part of prior to this breakdown. And I think I was just totally, as an artist, trying to figure out how I fit into that format. A lot of it's based on, you know, relying on the, you know, the wisdom of people like Miles and you know, artist management to help you move forward. Now that that kind of is, there's a breakdown in that. I will say one of the things for me personally, taking a lot more responsibility for my own self has been what I've gained from this. And I could say that I've had, you know, management, I have management now, and I rely a lot on that structure. And there's certain things that I could probably do myself to even help management. So, you know, certain things like, you know, how I, as an artist, thought about this industry has changed a bit, and what my actual ability to change my predicament is. You know, I've become more aware that I have more power than I thought I did in choice, you know. Mm-hmm. And through this situation, learning how to communicate and still keeping my teaching going, which is a big part of how I survive. Being able to do that through Zoom has and reach more students than I did in the classroom is actually something that I think will help me further once things move forward again. That's my contribution to the question.
Love it. Or yeah, go ahead.
I'll jump in here and say that I have it's a little bit of a circuitous answer, but I think for me, one of the things that I've been thinking about, and I know we talked about this last week when we were kind of prepping for this, about how a lot of us have gotten to kind of watch the entertainment industry evolve and shift many times over the course of the few decades with, you know, the advent of various technological advancements. And you know, one of the major shifts that I saw was the advent of music streaming and Spotify and Apple Music and all that stuff. And what that did is, on one hand, it made a lot of people who were making a lot of money from selling albums. It really slashed the influx of their income. And kind of the other thing it did weirdly in tandem is it gave a lot of people who were never able to actually cut albums because of the middleman, because of the record companies, the publishers, the distributors, to actually get their music out there and generate careers for themselves that maybe they weren't selling stages like Taylor Swift, but they were able to get, you know, this fan base of a few thousand people who became loyal to them and started taking either lessons from them or investing in their Kickstarters or whatever it was, and they were able to actually generate income. And so after that whole thing kind of became the new norm, I think a lot of us were able to look back and see like, oh man, this shift, which felt really painful for a lot of us at the beginning, actually ended up reaping a lot of benefits because a lot of people were able to express themselves. And I'm a little bit at this place that right now I'm having a hard time, like Mark was saying, looking back and into the immediate past and saying this was what's broken. But I'm 100% confident that within a few years we will be able to see how this weird little bubble of a moment has created radical shifts that will have a ripple effect into how we generate art. Whether if it's, you know, let me speak cautiously about the industry that I've been working in the last decade, which is theater, which is such an incredible medium to collaborate and tell stories and share. But the reality of New York real estate has made it as such that creating theater in New York has become almost impossible because rents for these theaters are so high that, you know, in order for them to put up any show, they have to get, you know, $500,000 from, you know, from an additional investor just to put the thing up. And so I don't know what's going to happen over this. Real estate prices are going to drop, which means that we're going to be able to make more theater. I don't know. I really don't know. But what I do know is that a lot of really smart people are taking this time to look at where we are now and what we can do. And I think we're gonna discover a lot. I know that for me, teaching the latter half of the spring semester online instead of in person made me ask a lot more questions than I usually do while I teach, and how I deliver things and how I communicate things and how I'm able to speak to people remotely. And I discovered a lot of things that even if we go back in the fall to solely in-person teaching, I'll be able to carry with me. And I'm thankful for that. And I think that's kind of where we are right now.
That's great. I'm glad to hear, you know, a lot of faculty have told us that they're engaging in a different way, obviously, you know, through using Zoom to teach their classes. And it has brought out a different level of discussion, different type of discussion. So obviously we miss each other, but it's good that there are things that we're able to take from that. Alan, did you want to add anything about what you feel like wasn't working?
Sure. Well, I mean, I would tend not to think that way. I always think about what was working and how great we had it in certain ways, and we did have it pretty good. But yeah, I mean, now that you've asked the question, I've certainly thought about this a lot. One thing is, as Aura had already alluded, you know, the industry has changed so much over the years. I mean, since I started out, you know, over 35, almost 40 years ago, I remember in those days, people would talk about the gray-headed audience, you know, we're losing our audience. In fact, it's not the same gray-headed people in the audience today that were coming to concerts 40 years ago. So there has continued to be a life in what we do in the classical music industry. But with the advent of CDs and then the digital age, things have really changed a lot with the recording industry and with the overabundance and over-availability, or the easy availability of music online. So we've had to work for years on you know, assembling an audience, getting an audience to come hear live music. It's become a very, very challenging thing. And I think we have still not taken into consideration enough the preciousness of having a live audience at an event. I think we've taken that for granted. And I think this is a time where we're becoming more in touch with what an audience really needs and wants from a live performance. Um, and as I've watched my students and my colleagues put things up on social media, I'm always watching for the quality of those kinds of things and what they're aiming for and how carefully people put effort into really bringing something out, trying to draw people into something really interesting and concrete, something with a real point of view or something really with entertainment value even. So I think that's a good thing now. I think we were certainly my students, I think, and even colleagues of mine, we've taken that for granted. I think we need to continue to work more in that direction of really examining what an audience needs and wants and what would drive them to come hear a live concert. The other thing I would just mention is that I've really enjoyed the online teaching in that I can really spend time. Alexa, you just mentioned that it gives us an opportunity to really have discussions that we didn't normally have. We wouldn't, under normal circumstances, maybe have in a live person-to-person lesson situation. But I like to spend time really talking to my students about how they're feeling during this time, what their thoughts are, how they're dealing with it. Do you get outside now and then? Do you try to get some exercise? Are you feeling okay? That's been an important part of each hour that I've taught since we went into this period. And finally, I think preparation is something that maybe suffered a little bit because students are sometimes spread very thinly, at least in my area. They don't have time necessarily with orchestra commitments and chamber music commitments and their coursework and going back and forth to things to adequately prepare and think about the music that they're preparing for recitals and concerts. So this, now that we have so much time available to us, or more time than usual, I think really has underlined the need for real preparation and really thinking about what we're doing.
That's great. I want to give Mike a minute to introduce himself. Mike, do you want to say
Hi.
hello, introduce yourself?
I was having all kinds of complications here,
All good.
but
Welcome.
yes, thank you. Yes, I'm Mike Moreno. I'm on the guitar faculty, jazz guitar player, and yeah, I'm happy to be here. Finally, actually, I was able to join. I had several wrong links. I won't get into it.
It's all good. We're glad you're here.
Yes, me too.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the trends that we're starting to see emerge. And I'd like to start with you, Miles, because you were talking about the Vanguard and some things you saw that are working. I think you mentioned there's like a Facebook event that with a virtual tip jar or something that was working well. And I think you're attributing that to good they know how to do their marketing. So can you talk a little bit about why you think it's working and just some of the trends that you're starting to see pop up?
Well, what you're referring to Emmett Cohen, who has a regular. He's branded this like live from Emmett's place or something, and he's done a good job at marketing it. It's available Facebook, YouTube, every Monday night. He does it, and he's had some guests come in. Veronica Swift just did a guest spot with him last Monday. But he's had other people come through, and it's with his trio because they've been playing together since the beginning of this pandemic. So they feel comfortable with each other, and they're neighbors. So I haven't talked to him to see just how financially successful it's been for him, but I have occasionally popped in on one of those sessions, and I've seen as many as over 1,000 people viewing it. So even if a fraction are donating, which he's very clear at the bottom of the page, the forms of payment they're accepting, then he's probably making some money off it. But I attribute that to some smart marketing and branding of what he's doing, rather than just deciding, suddenly I'm going to you know, stream myself, you know, sort of unannounced or practically unannounced. You know, but the Vanguard, I mean, obviously there's a huge brand to that. Keystone Corner in Baltimore, which Mark, you're there now. They started doing live streams. In fact, didn't they just open the club too? Mark?
Yeah, they're doing curbside kind of stuff. I don't think it's open yet. Nothing's really. I mean, Baltimore is kind of opening up in their first or second what stage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly sure about the patrons, how many patrons they're allowing in there, or I'm totally out of the loop, Miles,
Yeah.
because I'm not going to be
Yeah.
doing that anytime soon. So
Yeah.
you know, but
Right.
yeah, Andy's music is also open too, and they're doing it in a way that they're not bringing in people. There's only the video camera guy and the group and the MC.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems to be a format that I would be interested in. It's safe, you know. I would do it as a solo pianist. Yeah. I didn't mean to jump in yet.
No. But I also noticed that some artists are doing sort of these patio type performances.
Yeah, Oren did a couple of those.
Okay, and Kenny Barron.
Yeah. That's okay.
So, which surprised me that Kenny did that. But you know, there needs to be artistic outlet. You know,
Right.
Artists need to express themselves, and I understand that. You know, if the only way to do that is that, you know, whatever format you can use to express yourself that way, all for it. You know, I just don't think it should be overdone. That's all.
Yeah.
If I could add something to that, I totally agree with you, Miles. I think, you know, anything we do should have some kind of thought behind it, and not everyone's going to be successful doing it, even if you are coming up with something hip. It's really about, you know, having a sense of investment in it. It might take a little time to develop certain things. Also, different, you know, people are attracted to different styles of doing it, I guess. I've been successful to a point to develop an audience that knows when I'm getting ready to do a stream. I've been able to set up notifications to let people know. So it's a slow build for me, but I'm also doing something unique to what people normally see me do. I'm not presenting my piano playing as at all. You know, I play on the roads, I play on my electronics, things that I would not be able to really do as the artist that I've become in the normal scheme of things. People want to see me play some jazz. You know, they want to see me play standards and the things that I've been developing. And that's what I like to do in a live setting. But for this, I found some other things of interest that I would present. And I'm presenting the development of those things. So hopefully when things get back to normal, you know, I'll be able to really have something in full development. So I'm kind of showing the work in progress as opposed to the finished product at this point, and sharing that so people can get inspired to develop their own thing. That's been my take on it, you know.
That's interesting.
That's great, actually. That's kind of, I've been doing something similar, Mark, whereas I was telling Michelle about this earlier when I was starting it, that I designed a course for the summer. I wanted to also do something different. I wanted to teach, but I didn't want to do, I wanted to offer something that everybody else really wasn't offering this summer. So everybody was doing like group workshops. Let's make it economical. Of course, it has to be because of everybody's situation. But I came up with a course that has nothing to do with playing guitar. Like, I mean, it does a little bit, but like, it's for all students. It's for all instruments. And so it's more about the history of the standards coming from film scores. And we're watching parts of the movies. We're looking at what the harmony was in the movie, and then what the harmony was throughout the decades, from version to version, from Nat King Cole to Sinatra to to Miles Davis, to Chet Baker, to Stan Getz, to Dexter Gordon, or whatever. So, but it has nothing to do with the guitar. So and that was the intention. I was like, I need to come up with something that every other guitar player in the world is not offering in this moment, because everybody was offering lessons at a discount, which I was too. But I also just came up with a 9-week course that people could sign up for the summer. And that was my way of kind of, oh, I need to offer something different in this moment, because everybody has something, and most people were just playing live. And for me, that's just more of the same. I mean, we're just talking about how are we going to get by? How are we going to pay the bills? To me, if everybody was offering live streaming for free, mostly, or for tips, then that wasn't going to work. So just in my head, my thought process when this all started was like, just what can I do to get myself through the next 4 months of not being able to play one show? And that was a scary moment with New York rents, you know. So, yeah, but so I can see exactly what Mark was saying is like, people are getting a little bit creative and trying to figure out, well, how could I be involved with what's going on, but be different.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Ward, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I wanna jump in and voice an opinion that I think might be a little unpopular, but I feel it's important to voice it, because I think we're sitting here kind of speaking from the perspective of working musicians who have been fortunate through our work and through the time we've put into it to kind of break even a small barrier and be able to generate income from our art and our music. And I feel very lucky for that. And I feel like for those of us who have been able to do that, we're trying to figure out how to preserve a lot of the things that we were able to gain. And I really hear that. But I've also tried to use this time to be in conversation with a lot of emerging artists who have yet to get to the point where they are out there getting and being employed pre-COVID, and who are asking the very same questions we're all asking now, of like, how am I ever going to get a slot at this club in New York? There's so many artists who are out there playing amazing music, and I'm never going to get the just even the opportunity to play in front of people. And I gotta admit that for me, like, this worry about there's influx of content online, I don't think that I agree with that, because I think that when we're playing out in New York, we're playing for, I don't know, a small amount of people who are showing up at a live venue. You open this up digitally, and there are millions upon millions of people who can be exposed to different content online. And I just want to share, and this is not my personal story, but I want to pass on stories from my friends who are more in the emerging phases than some of us are, who have said, I've been able to put my stuff online, and so many more people have responded to my music than I've ever been able to get. I haven't even been able to get a gig at Rockwood before this, you know, for 50 people, let alone for people to hear my music. And suddenly people are listening to this recording I put online or whatever it is. And for a lot of them, it might not lead to anything, but for some of them, it might lead to them being asked to come in and lay down a track for an artist for some profit later on, or for more people to follow them later. And so I think it's a question of, like everybody's saying, generating quality content, not putting just any old practice session that you've done on the internet. But I've been appreciating people sharing their music in this time, and I know that I've been consuming more of it than previously. So I just do want to share that opinion.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I know for me, I was really excited that the Met was doing live streams, because, you know, I'm an opera person, but truthfully, I only watched a couple of them. I've been consuming much more jazz, musical theater, you know, some of the like New York Phil streams that have happened. It's just not things that I normally get to in normal times. So I've used this time to learn more about jazz or listen to more music, and, you know, just ask for a bunch of recommendations. So I do think there's something to that too, now that we have a little more time on our hands to consume things. So I want to pivot a little bit to offer our students who are watching some tips. And I know that's sort of a grab bag of ideas. I'm really curious about at-home setups in technology, because I know that's different for each of you. And I think it's something that if a lot of students they didn't have that set up at home going into this. And so now they're figuring it out. So just because you all represent different areas, what have been the best things that you've maybe invested in at home to make the best use of this time? So maybe Alan, you want to start? I don't know what your home setup was like before, but I can imagine as a classical artist, like you maybe were less dependent on it than other areas.
I think that's fair to say. I think I mentioned this before. I really didn't know much of anything before. I had a Zoom recorder singing home that I'd gotten from my son several years ago that he never used. So I finally learned how to use it. The old Zoom 4HN, it's a great machine. It's, one of the older models, but it's great. I have an external microphone, which has been really helpful. I got that to help me teach better, so my sound would come through a little bit more clearly. It's a Rode NT USB mini mic. And then I've used simple apps on my MacBook, but I'm not nearly as sophisticated, as I'm sure my colleagues are. So I'll stop there.
Mark, how about you?
So I'm a geek.
Yeah, I can tell.
I've been, this is like perfect for me because I've been developing my understanding of I build electronics. I make MIDI instruments. I make, things that interface with computers. So this is my world, like developing software and developing, things that do things. That's what I do. So this has been interesting because I built my studio to interface with people live. Like, welcome to my studio and we'll build, Now it's just me. And I've built a situation where I can create an orchestra sound, or I can, mix and master here. I use Universal Audio as my foundation for the plugins and dealing with sculpting sound. I use all DAWs. I use Ableton, Pro Tools, PreSonus, Logic. These things are useful. Each one has a different thing that it does. I've been dealing with these software companies since their beginnings. Mm-hmm. I had the first digital design product called the Audio Media 2 card back in the early 90s. So watching the progression of electronics and the recording industry become more accessible to people like myself, it's been a joy. And to come to this point where everything is like, now you have to use it and to interface with people is, it's been a challenge, but I've prepared myself personally because I invest in myself. And the reason why I did a lot of this is because what Ora was saying earlier, a lot of us we didn't have access to labels and to opportunities to record. And I recorded my first record in the studio, but I produced the record. I put the money together, and I learned how to do that for my first record. So this is something that investing in myself it makes the most sense. That's the only way someone else is going to invest in you, and even take notice. The kind of person I am, I feel like I try to keep myself informed about things that I'm interested in and things that I'm not as well. And I think having that kind of knowledge puts you in a certain place because, generally speaking, you get a record deal because people find a use for you. There's a lot of talented people out here, but if you're informed about what kind of deal you're signing, that kind of separates you a bit. You know, like I'm not going to sign a bad deal. That's so, you know, and then a lot of times you don't get opportunities for the deal that you want. So I created an environment where I could self-produce myself and then, you know, possibly align with a label or not. So I don't know if I was on track with the question, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah. No, I think yeah, the way you've set yourself up and explaining the why to that, that's makes perfect sense.
okay.
Um, Miles, I know you're in a little different setting, but you're like me, where you're probably doing a lot of email and calling people or Zooming people. What's your home office setup been like?
From home anyway. So
Yeah. Oh, okay.
everybody's complaining about working from home, but I've been doing it for 30 years. So it's no big deal for me. Um, it's just not being able to go out for dinner after at the end of the day that's the problem. No, but it's funny because prior to the pandemic, I was talking to a couple of artists on our roster about because this speaks kind of to Mark and his mentioning the record label scenario, and we all know that the labels, I mean, I'm talking specifically jazz here, they're just reduced to just a handful now. And there's only so many artists that these labels can sign. So what I've been suggesting, and it was kind of preempted by the virus, because financially it's probably not feasible. But when it is financially feasible to do, I think artists should be thinking more in terms of, and this is all about social media, not worrying about maybe putting out an entire album, which is the model for the very beginning, but maybe just focus on doing one song that they feel is real strong, and producing a video that's done well, you know, in a studio. And again, this has to be post-pandemic, but and getting it out there online and seeing if you can do what you can to get it to go viral and maybe monetize that, rather than worrying about, I got to get a record deal, because it's just so difficult to do that now. So looking at different outlets for monetizing your music, I think is extremely important. So that's one idea of many that I'm always thinking of things, but.
Yeah, that's great. Mike, what do you think?
Sorry,
There
I
you
had my mic.
go.
So, I mean, I agree with Miles on the fact of I I wouldn't worry about I was never worried about really getting signed to a label. So that thing of people were mentioning, like investing in yourself from the get-go. I mean, also when I first kind of got on the scene, my goal was to play with people. So it started there. Like I knew that if I ever did want to make a record, I would have to already have a name. I mean, it's very rare for somebody to just pop out of the blue, unless they have some kind of story, like, oh, they're 13 years old, or person is from this place. So, but so I toured for a long time with. I got some good gigs, luckily, fortunately, right? Well, I also worked towards it. So, I mean, it was. But I used that money that I made from those first, like 2005. I was on the road for 7 months, and I had never made that much money, and I spent it all on my first record. And that was the first, because I was like, I had an opportunity to do an album for either Crisscross Records or Fresh Sound at the time, but that was like, oh, go in the studio, recorded it in 6 hours, and then it's theirs. But I wanted to take 3 days. I wanted to be and go to Avatar Studios or something. So I really, really just like like went took a big risk, a big financial risk, and I spent all the money on my first record, at least what I had left over after rent and everything. So, and that was the best decision probably I've ever made of my career, because that money came back to me within a year, and I used it for the second record. And and so on and so on. And it just, because I was touring with people that had names, I was able to sell the records online. This is right 2000. My first record came out in 2007, so that's still pretty early in the iTunes age, and Facebook wasn't even around in 2007. That came the year later. So just based off of email and website, I was able to make that money back. So now that we have iTunes and Bandcamp and, well, you're not going to make any money on Spotify ever. So, but you know, there's several different platforms that you can get your music out there if you're willing to take the risk and you have the money. But first, how do you get it? That's the question. Is like, I mean, it's just really, I really believe in the style of music that we play, which is about the art form and, you know, self-expression and really having a voice. If you work towards that, this music rewards you. You know, it's not, that idea of being a poor jazz musician doesn't exist to me. Like that's not an option. You know, so like great jazz musicians make great livings because their art is worth something. So if you work towards that and you really master your craft, you will be rewarded by touring with somebody or even getting gigs yourself, and use that money to, for me, I've seen some of my best friends on the biggest labels in jazz you can think of. We all know who they are. I don't need to name them. But they spend their own money to do the record they want for the biggest jazz label because they're not investing. They're not even investing. So you have to do it yourself. You can be on so-and-so label, but you're still going to spend $5,000 of your own money to pay your musicians what they deserve to be paid, and maybe to get the artist you wanted to do the album cover. So you're going to end up investing in yourself anyway. So no label is covering all expenses anymore.
Yeah.
And so those 3 records that I did on my own, that's helped me through this time period where I'm not touring, you know, because those records are more than 10 years old, some of them. So yeah, I really would suggest that. But also, since this happened, I also, I didn't have anything here at my apartment. I've always been like one of those guys. I want my home to be my home. And when I need to go to the studio, I'll go to the studio. And when I'm on the road, I'm on the road. When I come home, I don't want a drum set like next to the kitchen, you know, that's just me. So, but now I was like, oh no, what do I do? So I basically just really, I was like, okay, well, what can I get that I really need? So it just started there, like, and luckily, I mean, I took some risk with that also. Like, I mean, I spent more than a month's rent at a time where I didn't even know how I was gonna pay the next month's rent. So I spent all the money on equipment, and I set up basically my home studio. So now I can teach. I have like good audio for voice, good audio for the mic setup and interface, and like monitors and all the cables. And luckily, like I said, I was able to get the money back just on the course that I was offering and the teaching and having something of some quality, that not just like, oh, I'm just teaching in my living room with the audio from my computer, you know?
Yeah.
So.
That's great. Yeah. Or.
Yeah, and I also just want to add, I think everything has pretty much been said, but just to add, I don't know if we have any students listening or anybody who doesn't have any experience with kind of a home recording setup, which I think is very fair. That I want to encourage you all to not feel overwhelmed by the world of at-home recording, because I think it could be as complex if you're looking at Mark's setup, who spent, decades figuring out the gear. And I am a little bit more along those lines of like, I'm a nerd. I love gear. I research it. I really love that. But there's also the version of it, which is really, really simple, and which doesn't have to go through all of the processors and the DAWs and all of the things that, yeah, like Alan was saying, that will allow you to take a leap from recording with your iPhone, recording from your internal Mac speakers. And I encourage you to see it as an addition to the investment that you're already making in yourselves as artists, to even start by taking the simple steps, stuff that, a lot of professional people who record would kind of cringe at, but I think really makes a difference. Like even just having a USB mic to be able to communicate your demos through as opposed to your iPhone speakers. And they run $150 for a pretty decent quality USB mic. So start there and work your way up if you want to, or stop there. But really, it doesn't have to be an enormous investment financially in order to take the first leap that will allow your recordings to sound exponentially better than they do right now with the internal speakers. And just, you were talking about the Rode USB mic, Alan. There's also, a very popular one. It's called the AT2020, which used to be a condenser mic, but now it's just it's a USB plug-in mic. It's $150. And then, like I have behind me, Apollo twin interfaces and an SM7. So that's like, let's say that's $1,000 investment. So that's the next step up. But there are tiers, and I really encourage you all to do a little bit of exploration in those.
Yeah, like even the Focusrite is like a pretty, like the Scarlett is, what is
Right.
that, like a $250 interface? Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what most people have. It doesn't have to be, I kind of went in. I was just like, if I'm going to do this, I want to think like 5 years ahead, not just 5 weeks.
Yeah.
We're lucky, aren't we, that the technology has reached this level where even the inexpensive stuff is pretty good.
The inexpensive stuff now was, yeah, what everybody wanted like a while ago,
They used to record on 8-tracks, so I mean,
Yeah, right.
we're way further. If you just have any sensibility about what you want, you can have your imagination can take you anywhere with the little that we have.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
definitely invest in yourself. I'd like to just pivot a little bit, and I know a lot of these of our students and the people probably listening now or later are going to wonder like what they can possibly do as newcomers. Some of the things that were brought up were making a single and presenting that. Some of the things that I would encourage my peers to do is to bring some of the youth in, and use your name to lift them up. That's really, they're gonna lift us back up in the end. If we don't help each other with the things that we have, if we don't share those things, then we're all gonna just be sitting in our own little rooms.
Wow, that's great. That ties into the history of the music, right? Like
It's just what it is, man.
all band leaders always hired the young guys.
Yeah.
And so if we're sitting at home just making music, why should it change?
Yeah.
But we got to support our peers too, but at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're about out of time, but there are a couple questions here. So Mike, for you, you mentioned that you shouldn't expect to make money on Spotify. So we have a question that's asking if you can explain why you think you can't make money on Spotify.
I mean, I feel like if you give your music away for free, no one is going to really buy it. I mean, the idea of Spotify to me with smaller bands are that if your music gets really popular, then you'll start to get booked, and you just have to hope that that's true. But like in the jazz world, I don't really feel like anyone's checking Spotify to see who's the artist that's being listened to the most. It's still about like who have you played with, do the clubs or the promoters know you already, et cetera, like have you been in the scene. So for me, and I've seen this happen, and I've seen also why the reason why I really don't have my music on Apple Music is they make it clear. If you don't put your music on Apple Music, they will not promote any new releases that you have. So and I've been putting my music on iTunes since 2007, before Apple Music, and they would always promote my new releases. They would even write and ask about them. And once Apple Music came out, which for me, Apple Music came out to dominate the market, basically. It killed iTunes. So you have to exit Apple Music to go into iTunes to buy music. So they want you to sign up for their $10 a month membership fee. So if you as an artist would not be involved with that, they don't want anything to do with you. So iTunes will not promote any new releases unless it's also on Apple Music. And Spotify, I mean, Spotify is just like Apple Music. So I just believe that if you put your music there, once it's for free, then what's the reason for anyone to spend $20 on it? Unless they're seeing you live, unless they have an opportunity to take a picture with you, to be next to you and talk for a second, and you can sign the CD, that's when you can get people. But if it's on Apple Music, I mean, I don't buy anything. I actually have an Apple Music account. I haven't bought anything that I listen to. I've never bought it. So if I'm not doing it, why would somebody who's 16 years old do it?
Could I jump in?
Sure, go for it.
I just like to say that I've had a lot of success through Spotify and through all of these platforms. A lot due to the fact that there's no middleman. See, you ain't gonna make no money if you got a middleman. The label's gonna take all your money. So if you're on Spotify and you're on your work, you will make your money. You'll make the percentages you're supposed to make. That percentages is cut in parts, you know. So there's we've been doing workshops here through the Harlem sessions on rights management and trying to get people up to speed on understanding what rights management is. It's the metadata. You're not making your money because your metadata is probably not correct. So there's certain things that we're, as musicians, don't really think about, you know, and there's people that are just as good as us in that platform that know how to get to what we're trying to get to. So I would say, I would invite you to one of the discussions we have, Mike, and maybe you'll get another perspective, because first of all, at this point in time, we have more power than we ever had. So say those people that listen to your Spotify and don't buy, guess what? You know who they are. You could service those people, you know, so now they know who you are. So there's different ways to think about it. If you're trying to turn a dime on every view, then yeah, you're right. But if you look at a view as a potential buy later, you have to be able to
Translate, yeah.
Yeah, it has to, you have to be able to make the likes, turn the likes into money.
You own your music, but the stuff that is on Spotify you're talking about.
Yeah, I own most of my music, yeah.
Right. So
there's a couple albums that are still being, that are still under other people's grip.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have a few of those, but like, so I've never thought about it in terms of the middleman. I mean, as far as sales, physical sales, yes, of course. But like, yeah, I mean, all right, yeah. Let me.
I meant to say conversion. Convert likes to money. I mean, it is a process though, Mike.
Yeah. So, okay. Let's wrap.
Let's talk. Yeah.
My idea about Spotify, from what I hear from other artists, has always been like they don't see anything from it. So I mean, but if
it's conversion, baby.
Yeah, maybe they're doing something else.
Which takes work, right? To do that conversion.
Yeah.
You have to sit back and, yeah, you got to do some work.
You can't just throw your stuff out there and expect everybody's going to throw money at you. So you got to do the work, and there is a format. Just like there's a format to what we do, Mike. You know, we can teach people how to get to it.
Exactly.
There's a format to get into that, and not everyone is hip to it. And they don't teach it in the schools. They teach you the history of the recording industry. They don't teach you how to make money.
Right.
They don't teach you how to do your metadata. I grew up in a time where I had to wait for Net 90 to find out how many records were sold, how many were returned, and then my money is cut in half because they wait until the returns come to pay you. So now it's different. You don't have to deal with all of that. So you got to think differently. And I would like to encourage you to do that by inviting you to one of these discussions, and everyone, you know.
Great.
Yeah.
Could I just ask one quick
go ahead,
question? I wonder if this is so interesting to me. I wonder if there's any way we could translate any of that into the classical music area.
Yeah, it's all. I think okay, I would say I'm hopeful that everything could be it's music. So, it's about the audience that is looking for the music. So, yeah, it can be done.
Cool. Wow.
So we have another question. This one is for Orr from one of our musical theater students. And they say, the thing about our field that really has my heart, it's a level of collaboration from actors, pit musicians, costumers, lighting. So my question to you is, in this time, you've experienced a feeling of almost, I don't want to create self-tapes because it is nowhere near what I love about my art form. And therefore, I create nothing. Because I don't have the yearn to be a soloist, I want and need to create with others to serve a story bigger than myself.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Is the question, do I ever have that feeling as well? Do I empathize with that feeling? Was that the question? Or what are some walk-arounds for that? I would say 100% understand and empathize. And yes, I think what you're saying, the idea of sitting at home and creating self-tapes in a way that just feels like you're sitting in front of a dry room and a camera and trying to express yourself in a form that is built to be collaborative is really disheartening. And far be it from me to say, just grit your teeth and do that, because I don't believe in that. But I do believe that there are things you can do that aren't self-tapes that will continue to fuel your love for the industry and to kind of prep you to being a better artist and a better communicator on the other side of this. And so I would say, for me right now, it's less about how many self-tapes can you generate while we're stuck at home. It's more about how many platforms or how many avenues can you find right now to express yourself that will continue to nurture that fire in you that you love so much about collaboration. And what are the tenets of that collaborative element in musical theater that really speak to you? And really focus in on those and see if there's any way to salvage some of those, even in ways that are new and creative to you, whether if it's having discussions with your friends or having reading groups online where you're reading plays online and sharing conversations about them. And just you can right now in this time, again, we're not looking at the long-term solution for how do I continue doing these things a year from now. We're talking about how to continue feeling fulfilled and nurtured right now as you're educating yourself, because that is the magical phase you're in. You get to, I mean, we're all still in that phase. We're going to learn for the rest of our lives. I mean, I'm taking lessons right now. And so find the things that really speak to your heart and capitalize on them right now. That's my advice. And don't worry too much about quantity of how many tapes. Worry more about what are the things that make you feel excited about waking up and taking that next creative step.
That's great. Yeah. Just to add, I take an acting class and, it's online now. How great it was when we were able to watch each other do scenes. It really had this feeling that we're still sitting in the circle together, and even putting the Zoom on speaker mode. So it's more like a film, right? You're going back between frames. So yeah, I think there are really creative ways other than, sitting in front of a camera and singing to a track. But I love your idea about getting with friends and reading through a play. I mean, what a great way to continue studying and connecting with friends. So we're just about out of time, but I want to give each of you an opportunity to leave our audience here with something maybe that you're looking forward to coming up, or anything you want to leave our audience with. So maybe we'll start with Mike.
Put me on the spot. Okay. Well, I'm just as in general, like myself for the summer. I mean, I'm looking forward. I'm doing. You guys, when I came on, you were talking about live stream shows, and I'm doing one at Smalls on July 10th. That's the only gig I have this summer, like actual in a venue with a band. I'm really looking forward to that, and just seeing how that develops. How many more venues are going to start doing something like that? I'm looking forward to, this course that I've been doing. It's been super fun, and there's a lot of people involved now. and I'm just looking forward to learning new things because all of this stuff is new to me. All of the technology, as far as home studio and what I can do better in teaching online, given the Zoom situation. I've just been having actually a lot of I'm hesitant to say fun because of what all is happening around here, but I'm I'm enjoying learning something new and experiencing something new. So I'm looking forward to more of that. And I'm looking forward to opening again and seeing everybody and traveling and hopefully sometime in the next year.
Great.
Mhm.
Miles?
I'm optimistic. Like I mentioned before, I am an eternal optimist. And I know we're going to get through this. I mean, just the other day, I heard Fauci talking about that he's cautiously optimistic about a vaccine by the end of this year or the top of next year. And that's a game changer. Once we get that, we can all get back to what we do, you know? So I just have to try to keep thinking about that, even though sometimes it's not easy to do that because we're in the thick of this, and there isn't anything going on right now, other than what I mentioned before from me personally, the things that I'm trying to do that I don't ever have time to do. So
Great. Mark?
Couple of things. I'd just like to say thank y'all for tuning in, and I hope this was helpful. It's been really a pleasure to be with my peers and collaborators talking about this. I would like to say that my last collaboration was with about 30 incredible artists. Well, not 30, it's about 20 great artists. We just put out a record called the Harlem Sessions After the Jam Rent Party. So I put out a compilation that features some of my peers like Terry Gully, Taurus Mateen, who else is on? There's so many people on the Lord. Please check the album out. It's a compilation of 21 tracks. Everyone contributed, some contributed too. But the idea was for those youngsters that are stuck at home and still paying rent in New York, a lot of my students are, they had to leave and abandon half of their world and go back home. This is an opportunity for us to help them and also bring awareness to their music and their contributions to this time. So I have that. It's called the Harlem Sessions After the Jam Rent Party. Outside of that, I just say, please, if you need me, those of you who would like to get in touch with me, you can reach me on all my social media. I'm available. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Alan?
Okay. First of all, thank you, Alexa. You've done a beautiful job, and my colleagues, I'm just blown away by what you guys are doing. You're thinking. I've learned so much myself today. Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm looking forward to my reed profiler coming. A fancy, expensive piece of machinery, which I have to wait about 4 weeks for. It's coming from Germany, but I really look forward to being able to actually make a good reed, to actually have a product that I've made myself. So that's one thing. That's sort of fun. I'm studying jazz this summer. I've always been I love jazz music my whole life. I've played it, and I just want to learn more. So I'm working with a teacher this summer. That's really, really fun and so inspiring. And for my various groups, I've been asked to make little video portraits. We have, with my orchestra, Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, we're doing a series of videos for people with Alzheimer's, dementia. We call it reflections. And so I'm using the little technology I have now to create a video in which I talk about my instrument, how I came to play it, give some examples and so forth. That's very, very fulfilling and exciting to be a part of. And I love the fact that I can come to my instrument every day and play whatever I want and spend as much time as I want doing it. And the sky's the limit. And I encourage everybody to do that because it just takes you off in avenues you might not have explored before. It can be very exciting. And I think sometimes when we get stuck, like with my own students, playing the Weber concertos or playing Brahms sonatas or playing the Mozart concerto over and over and over again, you can reach a point where it's not exactly uninspiring, but you can reach a kind of plateau. And it's good to experience other things in order to rediscover the joy which brought us to this field in the first place. So I love having that right now. I love having the time to do my own exploration and my own self development in that area.
Oh, that's great. Very well said. Or
Yeah, ditto to everybody, and thank you so much for including me in this and for moderating so beautifully. And I think just on the same line, I mean, I started this by sharing that I'm in the process of recording an album, which I'm really looking forward to finishing, and it's being recorded across, 5 cities and 2 continents, and it's exciting for me to get to do that and to continue getting to work with a ton of people who I normally wouldn't get to work with. I mean, one of the weird fun things is that a bunch of my colleagues in California who usually do tracking with their local buddies are allowing me to collaborate with them because everything is online anyways now, and so the distance doesn't make much of a difference. So looking forward to just continue all the collaborations and make the most out of it.
fantastic. Well, thank you all for taking time out of your day to do this. We have really enjoyed putting together the MSM Perspective series, and it's given us such a great chance to take advantage of this time and hear from faculty members across our departments, because as you know, when we're in person, we don't always get to do that. So I think that's been a really exciting thing to come from these meetings. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. And I just want students to bring your attention to the chat where you can see information on how to get your Setting the Stage credit for CME. There's a link there, or you can always reach out to Casey Molino Dunn if you have any questions on that. But if you did attend, be sure you get your credit. So we'll leave it there. Thank you to all of our wonderful guests. And thank you to our audience members joining us from wherever you are. We hope you're well, and we look forward to seeing you in the fall.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Yeah,
Everybody.